Hey everyone, this is Sebastian with Arts and Gabriel Valley and Keller Williams Realty. And today I'm excited because in just a couple of minutes, we're going to have Stephanie Tsai come onto Zoom with us. And so she used to be a principal at a high school in Los Angeles, and now she's a superintendent. And we're going to ask her what that means exactly and what her role is within education. But I believe that she has been in education for quite some time. And now she oversees a lot of schools in the LA area. I think these are charter schools and they all seem to be doing very well. My brother's girlfriend is a principal at one of the schools, and I know that they do a lot of great things for the kids there. They have a great attendance rate. The school seems to value education and value a lot of the things that are going to allow students to be successful in life and move on to the next chapter in their life, which is college. I think they have a 100% rate college admission from their schools, which is pretty awesome. So we're going to find out what she has to say about school ratings. I'm interested to know how schools arrive at a rating. How do they generate that rating online? The sites that we tend to use as realtors to look at this information is greatschools.org. If you want to check it out, we'll put a link here at the bottom and the website on this video. So you can go ahead and research the site. But sometimes what I see on the site is that some schools in the same city have either a 9 or a 10 rating, and some schools that a lot of people think are good schools have less than average rate, anywhere between 3 and 6, which a lot of parents, I think, are scared of because they have kids that are potentially going to go to the elementary school, middle school, or high school in their neighborhood. And I believe that, of course, they value education and they want their kids to attend the best schools possible and to get a great education. So today, like I said, we're going to ask her a couple of questions about this topic, and hopefully we can learn a little bit more about how the ratings work and how you as a parent can best choose the schools for your kids. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. So I do want to start by thanking you for taking the time to do this, and you're super professional and on time, and that's awesome. I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background in education. I'm not sure if you used to be a teacher or not, but you can let
Right.
us know now. And what do you do now, and what does that entail, your new position?
Yes. So my name is Stephanie Tsai, and I am currently an instructional superintendent. That means I oversee 6 middle and high schools that are in the Los Angeles area. But I've been in education for about 15 years. So I actually started as a student teacher when I was doing a teaching program at USC. And then I was a teacher for several years and then an instructional coach. So I was basically coaching teachers on what was going on in their classroom. And then after that, assistant principal and principal. And then about a year ago, transitioned to the instructional superintendent role.
Okay. And how are you liking it so far in that role?
I like it. It keeps me very busy, always challenged and on my toes, but I do really like that about the job. I feel like my days and my weeks go by really fast, and I'm always learning new things. I get
Mhm.
to work with a lot of really incredible school leaders. So I love all of my principals and administrative teams that I work with. And of course, I get to interact with all of our amazing scholars at our schools. So I love it.
Great. And so what I see from other people that I have spoken to as they move up in their position, unfortunately, they do go on to managing more of the adults and not so much of the teaching anymore. Do you miss teaching?
I do. I loved being a classroom teacher. I felt like there were so many good moments with my students. I taught before I was even a mom, and I often felt like just that relationship with them was always so special. And I love joking around with them. I always taught high school level students, and so they were usually like 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And I just thought like they were so curious. We worked at a charter that was focused on college, and so all of them were being encouraged and developed to be ready to be able to go to college. And so there were always a lot of life decisions, big life changes that they needed to be able to weigh. And I think, our kids were just so great and would always open up about like conversations about all the big things they were thinking about, like family dynamics, whether they should go away to school, stay, what they wanted to do for a career. So I do really love that. I get some of those interactions, but not as frequently in this role for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so what did you go to school for? What was your major?
So my original bachelor's degree is in history, which I got with the intention to teach history. So I did teach high school history for several years. And then I went back to school and I also got a master's in education then as well. That's how I started like my actual teaching, student teaching in my teaching career. And then I went back to school again for a master's in school administration. And I got a specific license in charter school organization management as well.
And for a lot of the younger population that follows me, if someone wanted to be a principal or a superintendent, what route do you think they should take in college? As far as a major, what to study?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think typically the pathway is going to be being a teacher and then moving into some sort of leadership role, like being on some sort of leadership team or culture team at the school and kind of moving your way up that way. I also do support a principal that has a background as a counselor. So she went to school for college counseling and she's a phenomenal school leader. And so even though she didn't have that specific classroom experience, she still had that insight of working in a K through 12 school and that experience in working with kids and also adults. And so I think that led itself to, her being really successful in an administrative role too. But I would say in terms of like specific college major, I don't know that it really matters. I think ultimately your college experience is going to give you that opportunity to really get organized, learn how to manage your time, learn how to communicate with others, like being able to be a really strong speaker, writer, just to be able to be a strong communicator in general. I think you're going to get that from a lot of different majors. Of course, if you are going to go into the teaching route, for sure, major in something that you're really going to want to teach. It doesn't have to work that way. You can major in something and get a credential in something else. But I do think it's helpful if you bring that content knowledge, specifically if you're going to teach like upper grades. I find if you're going to teach middle school or high school, it's helpful to have that really strong content background that you would get from majoring in something in college.
So you guys in the hiring committees, panels, do you guys like to hire from within the school?
We do a combo of internal and external. I would say in our organization, there have been for several years where we've pulled people from inside and promoted. I think that's been my experience. I was able to do that, and stay in the same organization for the last 15 years. My husband, same thing. Several of my colleagues I've seen move up throughout the organization. And then also now that I work for our home office, a lot of my colleagues in our home office had previously worked in our schools. That wasn't always the case, but I do think it helps because then you have the people who are supporting the work at a system level that really understand what it's like to be in our schools day in and day out because they've done it before in their previous roles. One thing that's really cool about our organization too, and you'll see this in other orgs as well, I think particularly in charters, is we do hire a lot of our own former students. And so now that we've been around enough years where our kids have graduated, gone to college, gotten their degrees, and then come back to join the workforce, you'll see it a sprinkling of each of our schools alumni. And so actually at the schools that I work at, almost every single one of them has an alumni, and a lot of them have alumni that are connected to the schools that I used to work at in some way, which is really cool. So I've seen those kids grow from being 14 to now being 31, 32 in the workforce, married, children. Makes me feel old.
It's so funny, but I have seen those. And I can imagine as a teacher or as a student how to feel now to go to a function or even after school to some extracurricular activities with a former teacher or principal. So, but that's cool that you guys do that. So it's encouraging for them, I guess.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit why we're doing this interview. So I thought it would be very interesting because I've been thinking about this for about 7 years now, maybe more than that. And as you know, I used to be a teacher. I only taught for 2 years, but I personally and my family, my dad and me personally, we value education a lot. And I see that education can be the ultimate equalizer when you don't come from a lot of money. So I see some people that use education to its highest level and get to, and education opens doors for people. So I really do value education, and why I even do the videos on Instagram, TikTok, and other places, because I do want to stay around education and make sure that people know what I'm learning also. So that's on the one hand, but on the other hand, also in real estate, we help a lot of families that have kids or are thinking about having kids. And so when they're making the decision of buying a home, a big factor is the schools in that neighborhood. And a lot of the times they go to gradeschools.org, they search on the rating, and we see that they want to buy in a certain area, but then they shift and they move elsewhere. And when we ask them why, it was because of the rating of the school. So that's why when we met you, then I thought, oh, one day I think I'm going to do an interview with her, because it would be a great person to get, to get input from you. So my first question is then, and we'll move gradually into this topic, but the question is, how do schools generate, or how do the sites generate the rating for the schools, if you know?
Yeah, so great school. So we use that too. So that definitely resonates with my own experience. We moved to our house even before we had children. And that was one of the things we looked at is, in the neighborhood, what were the schools rated in our city, and in the closest school to our house, what was that rated? And so greatschools.org, I would say, is a pretty popular one because it does link to like the websites, where you're looking at homes. And they do pull a variety of data. They'll pull demographic data about the school. So they'll tell you how many students go to this school. They'll tell you things like what's the student to staff ratio. They'll tell you racial demographics, how many English learners, how many scholars with disabilities, all of those things. But they also pull, particularly if you're looking at any public schools or public charter schools, they will also pull academic data. So they are pulling things from the California dashboard, which is essentially like our state public accountability website, where you can look at all of the testing data from schools. So you'll be able to see things like how the students there performed on the ELA and math assessments that are generated by the state. You can also see that broken down by subgroups. So you'll see that broken down by English learners, by scholars with disabilities, and different groups. You'll also see things like parent reviews on great schools. That obviously is like not coming from any like official state anything. That's just people can go on to great schools and say, I send my kid to this school and here's been my experience. Particularly with older kids, you might also see the kids putting reviews on their experience.
Oh.
So I think that's a place that you can get lots of unfiltered feedback on how the school's doing, good experiences and bad. So that's definitely something that we looked at in addition to those accountability metrics. I think also when you look at, if you dig further into the actual California dashboard website, you can also see things like attendance, like what are the attendance rates at that school? Does the school have an issue with chronic absenteeism? Because that's also an indicator of like, if kids aren't coming to the school, that can impact the academic performance and just the social emotional dynamic of the school. You can also look at things like graduation rates. So how successful, especially a high school is in being able to get their kids to graduate from the high school. You can also look at suspension rates. You want to see really low suspension rates. If there are high suspension rates, typically that's a red flag that there's maybe a lot of discipline issues, or that they really overreact to discipline issues and they solve that by suspending kids or kicking kids out of the school.
Some of the items that you just described are not on the site that I just mentioned. So yes. Where did you say we can get that information?
Yeah, California dashboard. So Great Schools pulls info from California dashboard, but they don't pull everything. So if you go to, it's cadashboard.org. And you can there's like drop down menus. You can type in by city or district. You can look at specific school names, and it'll also give you the school's dashboard by year. Something that's important is because of the pandemic, a lot of the new dashboard metrics were paused because state testing was paused over a few years. So if you were looking right now and you wanted to see, you would go back and look at the 2019 dashboard. That's going to have the most recent full assessment of a school. If you look at the more like 2020, you're going to see mostly just like demographic info. But that will give you a pretty comprehensive review of those different important metrics. And I would say I would look at that in conjunction with great schools, because what you're not going to get is that qualitative data from California dashboard. It's just going to be numbers that they pull on reports. Great schools is also going to give you how have people experienced the school.
Okay. So something like attendance, it seems a little bit unfair to me that the school is going to get graded on something like attendance where I have never seen a teacher knocking on the door or even, taking someone to school. That's all really on the parents or the kid. So it's a little bit unfair to.
It can be. I will say schools have evolved quite a bit in the last few years where actually we do sometimes go knock on doors and ask why kids aren't at school. So we will do home visits for a student that maybe has missed a lot of school. We also do have a lot more frequent family meetings with those families, because if there is a barrier, like say, for example, like the parents are working and they're not able to transport the student to school, right? Maybe they live further from the school. Maybe there's siblings in the household. We are able to sometimes figure out a way to support that child through transportation support, or even things like reminder messages in the morning. If it turns out, oh, the kid just has a hard time getting out of bed, we can set up systems where it actually sends the kid a text message or a call or something in the morning to try to wake them up. So fortunately, attendance has become something that we treat not only as the family's responsibility, but it is something that we do consider to be a school responsibility now. And because schools are rated on that, schools are, of course, going to be motivated to get the kids there. And attendance also affects funding. So we do get our funding from the state based on our attendance rates. So schools are really motivated to get as many kids there every day as possible.
That makes a lot of sense. So, but do you think that is on a case by case basis that schools like yours are texting students to come in?
Yes, I would say you'll see a wide variety of resources that schools will throw into that, and it's going to vary school by school.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Do you think charter schools are able to do that a little bit easier because it's a smaller school? Or?
Yeah, I think we tend to, because we're typically we're heavily staffed, like our student to staff ratio is pretty strong, and we tend to be smaller schools. And so whereas in LA Unified, you might see a school that has a high school with 2,000 or 3,000 students, you might see a charter high school that actually only has like 400, 500, 600 students. So I think that does give us that ability to do some of that individualized attention. You will see though some of those systems, like the text message systems and things, you'll see those at some of the bigger schools as well.
Okay, so something to note, and maybe parents can find that out in their particular schools. So that brings me to the next item here. I know some of the differences between a public school and private school, but what's the difference between public and charter?
Yeah, so a big thing is going to be, I'll just start with quick private to public. So private schools are funded by tuition, right? So the families are paying, or someone is paying that student's way. Public schools are going to be funded by tax dollars, essentially. Primarily in California, that's going to be coming from the state level of taxes. You also do have some federal funding, and you have some local taxes that are funding the schools as well. With charter schools, funded the same way. So we're funded by the state, we're funded by some federal money and some local money as well. The difference is you will see some charter schools who also get donor money. So we do have philanthropists that will want to donate to a specific cause. Sometimes the schools are themed in a specific way, like they might be an art school or a math and science school. And so you find people that have money they want to donate. They're really passionate about that thing. And so they'll donate money for programs at the school. One thing with charter schools is we do pay a small percentage into the district or whoever is overseeing us. So we're not allowed to be authorized or exist. Like you can't just start a charter school. You have to have this whole application. You have to get authorized by somebody. So for our charter school where I work, we're authorized under LA Unified. So that means we, ask for permission essentially, and we apply to be able to exist. But every single year they come visit our schools, they look at our data, and they make sure that we are outperforming their own schools. Essentially, they hold us to a slightly higher bar than their own district schools. And in exchange for that, we do pay about 1% of the money that we generate. We pay that back to them for their support in giving us feedback and their oversight of us.
Okay. When it comes to the teachers and the hiring process, is there a difference, you think, in how a private school hires as opposed to a public or charter school?
I think credentialing can be a big factor. So for the public schools, we are required to have teachers who are credentialed. And when you get to, like, for example, middle school and high school, there's like specific credentials for specific things, right? So to teach English, you need an English specific credential, versus elementary school, you have like a multi-subject credential. So there are, I think, more restrictions on, or more oversight of the credentialing when you're working in a public school versus a private. And then also you have a lot of private schools that tend to be like, can have like a religious background or things like that. And so they might be looking for someone who holds those beliefs or someone who's been affiliated with the church or something like that, before they hire them.
In your opinion, why do you think some parents choose to send their kids to private school?
I think there is a lot. I actually attended private schools for the first part of elementary school and then public schools for the rest. So I have some insights here. I think for my family, religion was really important. My grandparents were very involved in the church. My parents had been raised raised in the church. And so I think there was just personal beliefs that my parents wanted instilled in us, which is why we originally attended private schools. I think also, like, not even, referring to the religious aspects, the private schools tended to be smaller. So similarly, my local elementary school, I think, had 1,000 students, whereas my private elementary school had maybe like 200 or 300 students. So I think this idea of a small school, that is my child running by, a small school environment really appealed. There were smaller class sizes at our private school as compared to the public school. So I think my classes had maybe 20 kids, whereas when I went to public elementary, there were 30 kids in my 5th grade classroom. I also think there is, and I think this is still a draw for families, just this idea of like accountability from the families to the school. If you're paying tuition, right, that's a sign that you're really committed, you're really invested, you're spending, sometimes essentially what is like a college tuition to send your kids to elementary, middle, or high school. And so you do see a lot of like parent involvement, parent feedback, because those parents feel so financially invested in that choice.
So outside of religion, outside of some of the extracurricular activities and the resources a private school has, academically, do you think that there's a difference between private and public?
I think there can be, it's not a guarantee. So I would say you are going to find some very high performing, they're turning out kids that are going to Ivy Leagues and doing all these amazing things. I don't think that's a guarantee just because you send your kid to a private school. So I think, they can, because when you choose to go to a private school, they can put additional requirements in for you to be able to attend or continue to attend there. So I think they can just kind of raise the bar all around if they want to. The parents can have a high expectation of the school can have a high expectation of the kids and the families. So I think they can. I don't think it's a guarantee. I think same thing with public schools and charter schools. You can have really great schools. You can have a wide variety. You can also have within a school where you just have some kids who are really successful in that place and other kids who aren't.
Yeah, I believe so also. Do you wish that you had more involvement from parents at your schools?
We do a pretty good job of getting families in. I think our families, so because we work in a charter organization, our families have all applied. There's not requirements to get in, but they do have to fill out an application. They do have to be part of a lottery process. A lot of our schools do have wait lists. So not every kid that applies actually gets the space in the lottery and gets to come. So we do see high levels of parent engagement in our schools. And I think it's because, they're families that have chosen and they like want to be extra committed to their kids' education. And so I think they do often see through that by coming to the schools to visit. They come to our town halls, they come to our parent. We do like coffee with the principal or different meetings where they get to interact with the school staff. So we do see pretty high levels. They go to parent conferences, all of that stuff. It's not every family. And I think, now as a working parent, I very much understand how hard it is to be able to go to your kids' school events. I think we've evolved a lot through the pandemic. We now have Zoom technology and other ways for parents to get involved virtually. But when you are a parent and you are working or you have little ones at home that you need to take care of, it is hard to go to your kids' school during those school hours and get involved. And so I think I have a lot of empathy for that now. And so definitely don't judge families when they can't be involved physically at school. I know that school and education can still be supported at home as well through conversations with your kid, checking in with them about their homework, asking them about their day. I think there's a lot of ways for families to still support even if they're not physically at the school.
100%. I mean, with all that said, do you see a correlation between the parents that are involved and the kids that are achieving success and the ones that are not?
Absolutely. I think you're going to find outliers everywhere, but we do, and there is research to support when families are really involved in their kids' education, it does propel the kids' likelihood to be successful. It's going to impact things like whether, it's going to make them more likely to actually graduate from high school, more likely to go on to college, more likely to have just like a positive like self-esteem or confidence in school also when they have an adult. And it doesn't have to be their parent, but someone who is close to them in their life who's an adult or a mentor. It does have a positive impact on their success in school for sure. Sometimes you'll also find that mentor is in their school. It could be someone who's their teacher or their counselor, but just someone who's really invested in them and wants to build a relationship with the young person. It really does impact their success.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can attest to that because I was one of the lucky ones, I think, that had a lot of teachers that care for me and always asking me if I was doing okay. And I developed friendships with a lot of teachers that I even still are friends with right now on Facebook. And even some teachers have bought houses from me. My fifth grade teacher bought a house from us. So that was a cool experience.
Amazing.
Yeah, and also from my dad's side, that's why I'm so appreciative of what he did growing up, even though he had two jobs and couldn't be at the PTA meetings and all of that, but he always asked us, "How was your day? Let me see your report card. Oh, okay, you need to do better here and there." So is again being present. A lot of parents, I think, put a lot of weight on their shoulders and they think they have to be there 100% of the time, and it's just being present in the times that you are close to your kids.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
100% agree with that.
Why do you think that some kids are achieving success and some are not?
It's a great question. I think access in schools is really big. Just what access do you have to the materials? Are there materials that you're interested in? Are they culturally relevant? Do you have the resources that you need if you're an English learner, if you are a scholar with a disability of some type? Are you being given the access to be able to access the academic program, the cultural aspect of the school, all of that? And I think, again, like you'll see a variety of that in different schools and also within schools for different scholars or different groups of scholars. I think resources that the school has available and resources available at home can also make a difference, right? Some families can afford tutoring and counseling for their kids. A lot of schools do offer those services now. And so it's great that you can kind of bridge that gap. If a family can't get those things on their own or wants to get them from the school, they can, which I think is great. Motivation is a huge factor. I think you'll see different, in different, even year to year, like the same kid, their motivation can change based on their relationships with their teachers and staff, their relationships with their peers, based on what's going on with them in their personal life, their family life. I think we tend to see, particularly in middle school, where kids get, a little bit more like peer-to-peer tension. My children are trying.
They look like Bigfoot in the background. I can't see who they are, but I see the little shadow.
They're running to get snacks. They're used to mom working on Zoom. I would say, you start to see in middle school, like more like peer-to-peer tension, kids kind of getting a little bit more withdrawn from school or doing the, like, I'm too cool for school. And they're trying to navigate, like, do they love school? Can they be excited about school? Is it okay to be nerdy about school? I think deep down, I think all kids are curious. All kids want to learn. All kids are capable of learning. I think it just sometimes takes a while for a school or staff member or families to figure out how to support the kid in learning and how to get them really excited about school. I think I already touched on this, but just like that idea of relationships, I think we've had a big aha over the last few years. And I think the pandemic really pushed us even further to think about the value of relationships, peer-to-peer relationships, but also the adult to scholar relationships, and just making sure that we're treating kids. This is going to sound really maybe wild and oversimple to people who aren't in education, but just this idea of like, treating kids as human and seeing the whole child, not just seeing them as you're a student in my class and you need to do homework and you need to score on these assessments, but really like who are you as a person? And what do I know about you? What can I share with you about myself as an adult? What do we have in common? What can we learn from each other? This idea of like, it doesn't always have to just be like adults imposing their wisdom and knowledge on kids, but that kids bring a lot to the table too. And so how do we allow them to really explore? How do we create opportunities for them to interact with each other, to learn from each other, to really like push each other's thinking? And I think a lot of that is grounded in relationships and kids feeling comfortable in the classroom with themselves, with each other, with their adult in the classroom, to really open up and be curious and be themselves.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And you took the words out of my mouth, because that's exactly what I was gonna say. And I think we adults, we're too busy thinking of kids as kids, and we're multifaceted, no matter if you're 5, 12, 25, or 65, but we're a ball of emotions, right? And I think understanding that, and understanding how everyone is different, and understanding personality traits also, both from a parent's perspective and also from a teacher's perspective. Because like you said, you have to find the motivation in every kid. And so just because this kid doesn't like math, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be successful in life. Maybe they like sports, or they like English, or anything else. So I completely agree with that. And I think is our job. I don't have kids, but maybe not my job. It's our jobs as adults. I'm gonna say us as parents, to understand the our kids, right? And also teachers, and giving them, I think, options also. So maybe we give them different options on what to write about and what paper to turn in, right? And I think that would go a long way. Do you know Gary Vee?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so he's abrasive, but I like the guy. And so he's big on social media. And even though I do agree with him in the fact that you don't need necessarily a formal education, but again, I think if we go back to the foundation, I think just like owning a home is the American dream, I think education can be your ticket to much more. And so it can open up doors, it can open up horizons. And I think doing an introduction in classes of the different things that are out there are going to be helpful to students. And I have something to pitch to you. I just thought about it right now.
I'm
what
excited.
if what if your schools had like a big brother type of um, program, where you brought, I don't know, 5 professionals, and one is a writer, a realtor, a business owner, or whatever. And then kids can kind of sign up at, almost like a club. And then they come in once a month or once a quarter and meet with the kids that are interested in that subject or
I
that
love
industry.
that. I love that. It's like taking the idea of like a career day and expanding it to like, let's
Yeah,
actually interact. Let me tell you about what my day to day looks like. What education did I get to be able to,
100%.
like how I set myself up for success, all of that. Oh my gosh, it'd be
Yeah,
awesome.
I think that would be awesome. And I know a lot of people that would be game for it, because people are looking for ways to give back. And this would be a very simple way to maybe come for half an hour to an hour and explain what you go through, the different things you have to tackle, how math, English, and other subjects are important in my industry, which is real estate, right? And owning a business, running a business, doing the budget, marketing, all of that. So I think it would be invaluable for both parties, actually. So
I love that. We often find when we are having kids apply to college, they have a really hard time with the idea of selecting a major, because they often, I think, one, struggle to see like all the different career types in the world. And then they have to often have a hard time connecting like a major to a specific career field. And I think sometimes they limit themselves to like, oh, there are these major careers, like you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, right? You can be a nurse, you can be a professional athlete, but they don't necessarily think about all the different career types and all the different pathways that can get you to those career
yeah,
types, right? Like, yes, you can have the standard, I majored in English and I became an English teacher, right? Or myself, I majored in history, I became a history teacher, right? I wanted to be an administrator, I went to school for that. But I think there's so many careers where you can get there through so many different avenues. And it'd be really cool for kids to hear that
yeah.
and hear directly from people in those situations.
100%. And I just had this conversation with my niece. She just graduated from high school and maybe a year ago. And so she says she wants to do something in marketing, but she doesn't know if she should go for a degree in marketing or communication or PR, or what is someone in PR? What do they major in? So then I suggested, well, why don't you go on LinkedIn and research PR and go talk to some people and ask them, what did you major in? What do you suggest I do before you commit to a major? And she's like, oh my God, people would talk to me. I was like, yeah, 100%. You just send them a very tactful and respectful email or message, and I'm sure they're going to respond. So it goes along with everything we're talking about. And if you decide to do that, I would sign up
Please.
to do that 100%. So my last question to you, thank you so much for doing this interview again. So my last question for you would be, what would be your suggestion, 1, 2, or 3 tips that you would give a parent if they were thinking about choosing one school from the next, or they were thinking about a certain area to go buy a house in? What kind of research, or what should they be asking the school where potentially they're going to go to?
So for sure, looking at those websites, so greatschools.org, California Dashboard, but also I think really important, if you can connect with people who live in the neighborhood or people who send their kids or have sent their kids to those schools, I think you'll get really valuable information. I know when I mentioned we moved here before we even had kids. And so it wasn't until 7 years later that we were actually having to think about, where do we send our kids to school? And so we did engage with our neighbors who sent their kids to the local public school. We engaged with neighbors who sent their kids to private schools. And then we also had our own knowledge of charter schools. We ultimately ended up sending our kids to a charter school and had to go through that application process. But even for that school, I went and took a tour. A lot of schools will do kind of like an open house day or tours. Schools also now do virtual tours, but being able to interact with the staff members, to be able to observe classrooms, or just even being able to observe kids playing outside of the school and see, like, what is the dynamic between students? What is the dynamic between the staff and the students? I think the school tour was something that really helped solidify my decision, because I got to hear from the original person who was the founder of the school, who had the original vision. I got to interact with staff members who would be interacting with my kids. And I think for me, in addition to ratings being good, made me just feel more comfortable about, like, what is the day-to-day experience going to be of my kids? I also looked at what were the after school and extracurricular options available at the school. For me, particularly when you're enrolling kids in elementary school, sometimes the day is short. Sometimes they're only in school from maybe 8 to 1 or 8 to 2. We have 2 full-time working parents in our household. And so it was really important for us to find a school that had an extended school day. So our kids are able to get tutoring. They're able to take arts classes. They do have, and a lot of schools have, like, an after-school partnership, an organization that comes in and runs those things. So that was also one of the things that really helped solidify. So for sure, research the data, talking to people, and of course, what else can that school offer?
Those are great tips. So thank you so much for doing that. So thank you so much for doing the interview with me.